Welcome to Have a Bible Question Live, where you'll receive a Bible answer to your Bible question. And now, let's study the Bible.
Moving on, Wayne Vaughn writes, I don't mean to step on toes. How can a congregation get back to dressing acceptable during our worship services? And it says Jesus was not showing partiality. I don't know, guys, y'all may have to help me out on that last assertion there about not showing partiality. I instantly went to James because to me, James is kind of that good example to go to, because basically, and I was brought up Sunday best, guys. You're going to wear your Sunday best. In fact, we were talking about this. Evan Bolin, he is from Nettleton, which is near Tupelo. He's one of our graduates. And whenever he saw you, he said, he's got to be Daryl Beard's son. and he sent me and Ray a text a little while ago. But your daddy was much like my wife's father, and many of the older preachers that we were joking over supper or lunch today. It's some of them have been accused of wearing their tie as they mow the yard.
Right.
Because I always had the starched shirt. It was always this. Yeah. And I was brought up that way. You had your Sunday best, and that's what you wear to worship, and you got to put forth your best. And the passage we would often go to is in the Old Testament, when the burning bush, and the custom of the time was that you would remove shoes for holy ground. And because the Lord appears to Moses in a bush that was burning, but yet was not consumed. And God speaks, the Lord speaks from the bush and says, take off thy shoes, the ground whereupon thou standest is holy ground. And the concept is what made the ground holy, not the dirt. It was the presence of the Lord. Mm-hmm. And so that passage has often been used. We come before the presence of the Lord for worship. You need to make sure you come practicing the customs that show reverence. And I have no problem with that. The problem is that we don't realize sometimes when customs have changed.
Right.
And we're still trying to bind customs that we're used to upon other generations and cultures that it's not their customs.
Right.
Like, how many people, if we really want to go to that, and I've realized that's Old Testament, how many people, because my mama, you walk in the house, you're going to take your shoes off because you don't wear shoes in the house. You know, we're not going to trek in dirt, but how many people today would be willing to take their shoes off in there? Because I say, well, my custom is to show reverence, we take off our shoes. And by the way, there are places in this world that's what it is.
Yeah. I've preached in my sock feet in Thailand.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, there are places that it's that, but we're like, well, that's not our custom here. Well, what we don't realize is sometimes the older generation's customs are not the younger generations.
Right.
And so sometimes, and I'm not saying everybody, but sometimes what happens is we get frustrated when we say, when are we going to take back what is appropriate? And it means, what are we going to make my custom everybody else's custom?
Yeah.
You had something?
Yeah, Romans chapter 12, verse 1, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Now, I realize this is talking about our actions, but when it says present your bodies as a living sacrifice, Paul is appealing back to the Levitical system, whenever those sacrifices had to be what? They had to be pure, unblemished, and accepted. And so, there's no set way we're supposed to dress. There's no set rule in that regard. But this, to me, right here says you need to give your best to God. And so whatever that best is, you need to give it. And this is one of those things that drives me crazy. You talk to a lot of people and you say, well, if you had the opportunity to meet, pick the person, the President of the United States, the Queen of England, whoever it is that you greatly admire, are you going to show up in shorts and a T-shirt and flip-flops? But yet you want to come before the throne of God in shorts and flip-flops and so forth. And so you need to get your priorities straight. I think it comes back, it's a heart issue. if you're willing to give your best to God. And let me just say this. I remember very distinctly a man come walking in, and he had on black chaps, leather chaps, had on it was a gang jacket, essentially a motorcycle gang jacket, tattoos and everything else. And he walked and he sat down in the front, and somebody got upset with him. And come to find out, that was his best.
Yep.
That
well,
he had to
James,
give.
It talks about the man that comes in nicely dressed. I didn't get to this.
Yeah.
He comes in the nice dress, and we treat him special, but here's the one in vile raiment, and we sit here in the back. Which the back is actually the good seat, isn't it? But anyway,
that's what everybody in the church seems to think.
and so we have to be careful that, and Marilyn, I agree with you. We need to dress appropriately, but remember, we do everything by authority, and that would include defining what is appropriate. And you can't take a personal judgment. You can't take an opinion and say, this is what's appropriate. I can't do it, because sometimes that biker jacket will be appropriate. Sometimes under certain situations, it might be a pair of shorts. Yeah. Because I've seen situations where somebody lost their luggage. Well, what if they lost their luggage and that was all they had?
Oh, they can't come to worship service. Sorry.
And I've known of that situation happening.
Yeah.
It comes back to the heart issue. You're giving your best to God. Alan Drury writes on here. He says, could a priest just walk into the tabernacle in Exodus 30 however they wanted? God has expectations. He does expect certain things of us.
Yeah. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I believe God does have expectations. I believe God does deserve the best we can give him. But we have to have a recognition of culture and the changes that take place in culture. Because going back to your illustration of, what would you wear if you were going to meet the Queen of England? I used to, and many preachers, I'm sure, used to make the point, would you go to a funeral dressed the way some people are dressing to come to church? The answer to that today is yes, they would. Because I've been to plenty of funerals where people show up in jeans and a T-shirt, or a pair of shorts and something. The culture is changing regarding fashion and what is considered nice, what is considered appropriate, what is, and, I think, Guyton, we were talking about this too the other day. I would guess that the vast majority of, say, teenage boys up to, at least, say 18, just to throw a number out, I would guess that the vast majority of that demographic in America, including members of the church, don't even own a sport coat or a suit or a tie, for that matter. I can't, again, going back to funerals, I don't know how many times I've heard it said at a funeral, I had to go out and buy this suit yesterday for the funeral, because I didn't have one. And I know you're not specifying a specific kind of clothing,
right?
But let's do what we do to the best of our ability to do it. But there are some, I'm afraid, who want to bind a certain fashion. And
that's what we got to be careful of.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Patricia Shaw, I love you, and I agree partially, but not completely with what you're saying. If the elders have made the decision for the men to dress with coat and ties, that should be final, no excuses. Now, I'm going to pause there, because the reason we accept that is because cultures have. Well, let's take that aside for a minute. If the elders decide that our best is going to be something we don't wear any other time, so we're going to have robes. And when you come in, we have robes over here, and we expect everybody to put on a robe. That way everybody is modest. We don't have to worry about anybody showing skin. We will all be dressed the same, so there is no respect of persons. Are these kind of some principles here that would be biblical? And so as elders, I'm not an elder, but this is a hypothetical. As elders, we expect every one of our members to put on this robe in order to worship. Do the elders have the authority to make that a requirement? And I would argue they don't, because now they are going beyond what Scripture has.
For their position, for what their job is as a shepherd.
And so oftentimes we accept the coat and ties because culture has said that. And look, I get it. I was brought up that way. I understand. I mean, I'm there, but we are dealing with an authority issue, and the elders cannot just say, well, my judgment is this in the sense that I like this, and this is what is appropriate, and now everybody's going to do what I like because I think this is respectful. You cannot do that and if you want to do that, show me book, chapter, verse, and it's not there. I've looked for it.
Comes back to a hard issue, and by the way, I agree with you what you were saying. It comes back to a hard issue in both sides, and this goes back to balance, because on one side of the coin, you have those who want to bind, but then on the other side of the coin, you have those that want to use it as an excuse to just dress however they want, do what they want.
And we're not justifying that either.
We're not justifying that either. That's why I keep saying it's a hard issue, both in the one that wants to bind that on somebody, as well as the one preparing themselves to worship, to come to worship.
Just to go back to your thought on the elders, I know it's getting close to the end of our time. And this is a whole other line of discussion, but let me just throw this out there. Not every judgment matter is within the elder's realm of authority to rule on.
Yes.
And we need to recognize that and respect that. And elders need to recognize and respect that.
And that's why we try, book, chapter, verse. It's amazing the things that suddenly we can leave book, chapter, and verse. And, well, I feel, I think, I believe. I cannot say a tie with a sport coat is necessarily better than the man that wears a dress shirt and a pair of overalls because that's the best he has.
Yeah.
Based upon biblical principles, the heart. I appreciate that you keep bringing that.
Yes.
And that's where, we can get to a point that it becomes, and it actually is not an expedient, because we become judgmental. We start looking down our nose at people. We start saying, this is our standard. Y'all, just be careful. I understand it's been preached in the past, and I'm sure by well-meaning people, that our best is a tie and a coat. Well, it was also preached at one point in time that it was sinful for a woman to never
uncover her head,
to wear pants, or to uncover the head. What is this? It's customs. Yep. Remember what Paul said about that. We have no such custom in the church.
Yeah. Yep.
He was very quick to draw lines between doctrine and customs. The style of clothing is a custom, and we have no authority to bind cultural expectations, because, all right, are we going to start getting into what kind of tie? What constitutes a tie?
Right.
Does
a bolo tie match well enough?
Yeah. Is the tie tied properly or not?
Yeah.
And I get some cultures, somebody put on here a minute ago, it was like about the hats, and, women used to they would wear the hats, and even men would wear hats, and, a cane. At what point in time does it get to where we're putting on a show?
It becomes a prideful thing. It goes back to the heart.
Yeah. And I'm not condemning people that are wearing ties, or if you wear a hat, or if you, I'm saying it's a personal heart issue that deals with your culture, and culture goes beyond just America versus Thailand. It includes race at times. Sometimes it is ages. Sometimes it's the North versus the South. Sometimes it is whether you're on East Coast versus West Coast. There's a whole culmination, even the setting that, are you at church camp versus the regular assembly? And we need to be very careful about trying to create laws where God has not created them.